Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Amanda. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ben. Thanks so much for having me.
So before we start, let's get to know you a little bit, Amanda. Tell us a little bit more about your background, what you love about marketing, and then we can kind of dive into the subject for the day.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. I would describe myself as a Boston-based, ride or die content gal. So, I've honed my skills over the years by working as an editor, a freelance writer, a copywriter, and then moving into UX writing, content strategy, then leading some big content teams, and now leading product marketing at Vivino, this awesome wine app where I've really found my dream job. I get to lead content and how it manifests across all of our channels. And to do that with wine is the freaking dream. So that's a little bit about me.
It's so nice when your career and your passions kind of align and you can have a lot of fun, especially when you get to write about something that you know people care about. That makes a big difference for sure.
Totally.
So, Amanda, you have this really cool framework for really how to get maximum impact from your content. Really, it's 7 steps for socializing your content impact. And this is so cool. And so I almost don't want to preface any more of it and ruin anything, but where did you come up with this framework? How do you implement it? And maybe we can just start walking through some of the steps.
I came up with this framework primarily over the last 6 months at Vivino as I've really stepped into product marketing, segueing out of content and thinking about product marketing at large. And what does that mean as a function? And how do you start measuring your impact and socializing it and getting people on board so you can keep having more impact? So I would say it's been happening organically over the past few months. And then really putting the framework together was 2 hours before our call and documenting it for this episode. So thanks for forcing us to do that.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Very cool. Yeah, it sounds like it's kind of the virtuous cycle is the term that comes to mind, right? It's the gift that keeps on giving as you follow and have kind of this rigor to it, making sure that you're following the process. So how does it start? Where do you start this whole process with?
So step 1, I think, is deciding how do you intend to have impact? What problems are you trying to solve and what do you want to learn? An example from Vivino, we recently stood up this premium subscription that's full of tons of great features. But the question became what features might resonate the most with people? What's going to compel people to sign up? So that led to the decision okay, awesome. When we launch this thing, let's test into different value props. So that's really the impact that we want to start assessing. What value props are resonating most and how do we get a read on that?
I love it. Okay. So what are you trying to answer is kind of the beginning. What's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the information or the knowledge you're trying to acquire? I love that. So where do you take it from there?
Exactly. And I think with content in particular, it's when you really want to measure the impact of your word choice specifically, it's how can different ways of framing a thing make a difference? And are you even talking about the right things to begin with? So picking what you're promoting and then how you do that.
Very cool. I love that. And I think one of the interesting things about content is a lot of times we have a hard time really figuring out how to track it and analyze it and know its impact. So what I love for you is saying, okay, what are we trying to figure out and solve from the content? So you're building in this method for saying these are the important analytics coming from the content. I think that's really, really powerful that you're doing that. Okay. Step number 2, where do we go from here?
So then you got to make moves, right? So I think step 2 is stand up your testing plan and then launch this thing. So, for instance, at the launch of this premium subscription, our product marketing team set up flights around the campaign launch. So the first flight promoted a roundup of the key features of the subscription. So the question there being is it maybe most compelling to give end users a tidy little hit list of all the best stuff the subscription has to offer? And then the second, third, and fourth flights each dove into one value prop at a time and what was most magical about it. So for instance, our second flight really focused on like enhanced tooling, and our third one focused on deeper insights. And the fourth one was on like learning and wine adventures you could take. And those flights manifested across marketing assets like email and push and in-app modal and on-site banners. And that same value prop messaging was repurposed across like product-owned acquisition landing pages and the sign-up page for premium, and even like contextual upselling within the features themselves if you engaged with those features. So we had excellent piping like throughout CRM and app and web to work with to tell this super cohesive and clear story and have all these different points where we could measure the content.
That's cool. So there's a lot of operational background that you've done, laying the groundwork that sounds like it was really key for making sure that this works.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I would say like the third step is like, once you have your test off the ground, like it's running or it ran, then the step is like chasing and documenting the impact of that. And, you know, a handful of different people may oversee each of the marketing channels you use for your test and or the stages of the customer journey where you plugged in your content across product. So you often have to like put your sneakers on and get out there and like connect the dots across all these different teams and find your point people. And like with the premium campaign launch example, we were really curious to understand our product market fit. So like what value props and features drove the most clicks and conversions? And also like what might we learn about the gap between folks who clicked into a marketing asset or engaged with a feature but didn't convert? And how could that then inform what we could or should do next? So, you know, we gathered stats like click-through rate, conversion rate, those percentages of click-through rate and conversion rates, and started capturing all of that in the scrappy spreadsheet, like clearly grouped by the name of the campaign. And then in tandem, our product pals stood up a dashboard to capture like feature level engagement, contextual upselling, click-through rate and conversion rates. So we could see like subscription signups by source at the feature level, along with the overall like number of active premium subscribers that all of us can reference at any time in real time. So just get like culling all of that data from all those different people across all of those places is a step.
I love it. That's a big step. The ability for you to get that buy-in company-wide is amazing. And I love that you've kind of put this mission behind it, product market fit. It's not just a marketing initiative and just a content campaign. This is like a company-wide initiative.
I'm super lucky in that regard because I've certainly worked at other places where we did not have that buy-in and it was so challenging to even stand up that piping. I'm really, really lucky at Vivino where people like that concept of product market fit like came from the product team. They really are hungry to understand like, are we building the right thing? And are the people we're building it for responding? And do they even want it? So we have a really strong culture of that already in place. And I'm just very lucky to be there and along for that ride.
That's very cool. That's very cool. That's a huge part of culture that I think people kind of underestimate and undervalue. So that's great that you've built that. Okay. So I think we're on step 4. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, I was going to say that's a perfect segue because I think like in my role at Vivino, it's like, okay, so we've collected all that data. It's in this scrappy spreadsheet. I'm starting to like pull this story together. And I think step 4 is like starting to socialize and build momentum within your core team. This sounds so tactical and so basic, but you know, we stood up like a recurring meeting. So like in our case, it's a weekly product marketing sync and our core marketing and product partners and executive stakeholders are all in that meeting. And I feel like just having that on the books as an expectation, it like keeps everyone accountable, keeps everybody aligned, and it really builds momentum for like, what do you want to learn next? And like, how do we plan to reach our acquisition and retention goals? And there is hopefully like a ton of stuff up your sleeve that you want to keep testing into. So we mostly prioritize in that meeting, like what are the bigger things we're going after first and what are we icing for now, but want to come back to?
Very cool. I love that. Yeah. What have we seen? Where are we going? All of that. And I 100% agree. Sometimes the greatest way to avoid procrastination is to give yourself a due date. And like the meeting is kind of that arbitrary due date that you're giving yourself.
Exactly. And it's like, guys, we've got to show results at this meeting. Like, how'd that perform? So it's not just like, oh, I'll get back to you later. It's like, okay, that's you now.
I love it. That's genius. That's awesome. Okay, so after we're doing that recurring kind of internal socializing, where do we take it up from there?
Then your next step is to create a toolkit of some kind. So, like in our case, we started standing up our product marketing toolkit. So that way, everyone's really clear and aligned on like all the touch points you want to leverage as you're continuing to test into your concepts. So, like we've laid out super clear, well, I would describe as very clear, hopefully super clear customer journeys then for like acquisition and retention. And we've also tiered out our campaign types. So, like, is it a light, medium, or major campaign, or is it more evergreen? And we have criteria for each of those campaign types and an asset list against them. So, like, what are the touch points we plan on leveraging for each campaign?
Very cool. I love that. And it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, until you get to the toolkit stage where maybe you're early on in this process, it's almost like you repeat the first 4 steps over and over and over again. And then that's helping you build the toolkit. And then once you have the toolkit, you can kind of move further on in the process. Is that kind of how you approached it and built the toolkit in the first place?
Yes. Yes. We were like in the firestorm of like testing and learning. Like we just built the toolkit a couple months ago. Yeah, it came
Nice.
later.
Very cool.
Like we had the journeys laid out and we kept revisiting them and relatively knowing what touch points we wanted to test into. But yeah, it was more like once we tested again and again, we could start moving toward like what good looked like and then iterating on our toolkit. Exactly. So like we just kept like committing to documenting how everything performed. I think you really have to have that rigor. And we could start comparing our campaigns like side by side in that gnarly spreadsheet view. So like when it came to like what good looks like, we could start looking at, for instance, like our highest click-through rates of like an in-app modal and start hypothesizing like, how can we repeat that level of engagement? And like what learnings could we distill at that asset level? And like when it came to iterating on the toolkit, I feel like moving toward benchmarking really allows you to dig into like trends and touch points where maybe you expected to see more engagement, for instance. So you can start considering like, oh, do we need to adjust like the logic or the segmentation of this touch point? Or and like at what point is it even worth the ROI on creating content for that? So yeah, you can really start drilling down into refining like what you go to market with and where and why and when.
I love that you use the word why, because I think that's one really important thing. Often in marketing, we say, okay, we did this and we got these results. And then it's really almost impossible to answer why. And that's the most important key. And I love how you've built the framework to say, we can now answer why. And if we can't, we know how to go test and find out what the why is. You know, just like, hey, what features are the best features for this new premium subscription? Well, we can go figure out what improves and why it does it and this and that. So I think it's really cool. You've built the way to find the why, which so many people never get to, which I think is really powerful.
That's a beautiful way of framing it, Ben. A way to find the why. I like that.
Yeah, I love it. Very cool. So you've gone through all of this discipline and rigor to go through these first 6 steps. What's the next step? What do you do from here? How do you kind of wrap this all up?
So I would describe the last step as starting to like socialize your results and learnings like more business wide and then externally too. And I think the more you can lead with how your content performed and or like how your efforts broadly contributed to like feature engagement or conversion, and then to take the time to like list your key contributors on the project, I think the better. So like, yeah, internally, like we do this at that weekly meeting I mentioned, and also in like a dedicated Slack channel where people now have come to expect to see updates. And externally, I mean, you found me on LinkedIn, Ben. I freaking love Vivino and I really believe in the product. So it's super easy for me to like authentically promote what we're up to on my own page. And we also like post from our Vivino account as well. And I think like the algorithms favor like learning based posts anyway. So like it's kind of like, so all the work you've done with these other steps should set you up nicely.
I love that because so often it's so easy when you're on social media or any platform to just like say something, and some people might agree, some people might, and something might go viral, but really you have no idea if that person actually knows what they're talking about, which is really hard because you don't actually know them. This framework shows like, hey, here are results. And that's the number one way, in my opinion, to differentiate between an actual subject matter expert and someone who would just like to be a subject matter expert. So I love that you've kind of built it in, and it's the internal sharing, but also the external, which I think is so important for us to share externally those findings. So I love that you built that into it. All right. Well, this is amazing. And as promised, the time goes by so quickly. Amanda, thank you so much for the time. This is great information. If anyone wants to reach out and connect with you online, how can they find you?
Yeah, for sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think my username's Amanda Edits and Amanda Morrison. I'm on there. Yeah, feel free to find me.
Very cool. And we'll link to everything inside the show notes. But again, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, right back at you. Thanks so much, Ben. This was fun.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.